So again, guys, go ahead, take out your note sheet from yesterday. We kind of started to graph, and when we got to part B, we tried to do our factoring thing, and well, that didn't work so well. So I'm going to get rid of all those pairs we tried. So if you did write them down, just erase them for me. Sorry, guys, I should have told you yesterday, you really didn't need to write all those down. They did not work for us. Oh, we still do need 0 equals x squared minus 8x plus 8. So when we tried this yesterday, we could do our concave up or down. That didn't change because we still have standard form. Our x squared was positive. So we said, well, our graph's going to open up. If you need to draw yourself that little picture reminder, please do so. Remember, concave up or down is how our graph is going to open. It's not how our graph is moved. So just be careful on that. All right, so yesterday we saw for part B that factoring didn't work. We could not find two numbers to multiply to give us 8. That would also add to give us negative 8. We tried 4 different pairs. We tried 4 different pairs and none of them would work for us. So yesterday we spent our time focusing on the quadratic formula, which is right down below for us. And with that quadratic formula, we were able to find our solutions, which were our x-intercepts. So that's the path we need to choose here. We're going to get our x-intercepts, and then we're going to continue finishing off our graph. All right, so when we started yesterday, the first thing we found was the discriminant. The reason why we did that is because the discriminant would tell us how many solutions we have, which in turn tells us how many x-intercepts we have. And then it's also a chunk of that quadratic formula, so it's not extra work. It's not extra work. It makes using the formula easier when we go to do all the computation. So we're going to start with the discriminant. Our discriminants are b squared minus our 4ac. So we need to pick out... Actually, we need to pick out our A, B, and C first. Let's start there. Got a little ahead of myself here this morning. We saw one like this yesterday where we had just a plain x squared. Remember, I can't put a variable in for my A. I'm not going to write x squared for A. If A were 0, the x squared term wouldn't be there at all. The number that's really in front of that x squared we talked yesterday, we reminded ourselves there's really a 1 there. Our b is always the number that goes with just our plain x. Don't forget the sign. It's a negative 8. And when we talked yesterday, I said the biggest mistakes I see with the quadratic formula involve having the wrong sign. And then last but not least, our c is positive 8. All right, so now we're ready to rock the discriminant. And the discriminant, remember, and actually you can see it right down at the bottom of my screen there, it's the b squared minus 4ac. It's the part that's underneath the square root. And guys, literally what we do, we take each value and we substitute it in for the correct variable. So we start with b squared. B is negative 8. We square it. Then we have minus 4. A few people asked me yesterday, Miss Golly, where does the 4 come from? The 4 is part of the formula all the time. The 4 does not come from the equation itself. The 4 is part of our formula. And then we have times A times C. So again, that's b squared minus 4ac. We're just substituting what each variable equals in for the variable in the formula. That's all. And then we talked yesterday, just go ahead and put that right in your calculator. You don't have to try to simplify things, do mental math. That's not what I'm looking for here. I'm looking for, can we use the quadratic formula is what I'm looking for. So what do we come up with there? Let's see, 64 minus 32. Make sure you have parentheses around the negative 8 when you square it. That was a common question I had yesterday. People weren't getting the right discriminant in their practice. You have to make sure you put parentheses around the -8. The squared goes on the outside. The exponent goes on the outside. All right, so now we have 32. Our discriminant is positive. So if you want to look down below, you can. Discriminant's positive. So we know our graph is going to have 2 x-intercepts. If you want to make that note there, you can. So discriminant's positive. So that means 2 solutions. It means our graph's going to have 2 x-intercepts. So when we graph, we know we should cross the x-axis twice. We talked a lot yesterday. The discriminant's not extra work. Now that we go to do the whole quadratic formula, which again, you can see at the bottom of my screen here, it's on your sheet. When we go to do the whole quadratic formula, the discriminant is the piece that I have circled in the formula itself. So we didn't do extra work. So now let's go ahead and find those x-intercepts. So we're going to have x equals. The first thing I come across in the formula, there's a negative sign in front of b. That negative sign, we read that as the opposite of b. So I have a negative sign there, and then my b in this case is also negative. So we get a negative, negative. If you're getting comfortable enough with the formula and you want to just go ahead and write that as a positive right away, you can. It depends where you're at with the formula. Then we have our plus minus next. Again, I'm just working my way right through the numerator of the formula. If like, Miss Golly, where'd that come from? I already did the opposite of b, and now I have the plus minus. Then we have the square root. I know my square root's a little tough to see there because I have the discriminant circled. But remember, guys, the piece that's under the square root, please don't redo that whole piece. If you redo that whole piece, you're going to see the discriminant as extra work to do. Discriminant's underneath that square root. And then our denominator is 2 times a. So again, all I've done, it's like, whoa, Miss Golly, wait, whoa, this formula is confusing me. All I did was take A, B, and C, and I put them into the formula. Any place I saw B, I put -8. Any place I saw A, I put 1. Any place I saw C, I put +8. I didn't do anything else special. All right, we talked yesterday. I like to clean things up a little bit before I worry about the plus, minus, and the square root. So my -8, I'm going to make positive. And my 2 times 1, I'm going to write that as 2. So I want to clean up the little things before I start dealing with the plus, minus, and the square root of 32. I like cleaning those things up first. All right, so now let's go ahead. Square root of 32 isn't going to be pretty. So we said yesterday, hey, let's round to the nearest. Let's go 100th. That's 2 decimal places. All right, so the square root of 32. So 5.66. All right, so here's what we have. We're going to have 8 plus or minus 5.66 divided by 2. Miss Guy, where'd 5.66 come from? I rounded it. Oh, and I rounded it, guys. So we need squiggly equals. There we go. The 5.66 is the square root of 32. If you're still not sure how to find the square root using your calculator, let me know today so I can help you with whatever one you have. Most of them function the same way. Some are a little different, but let me know, because being able to find the square root, it's how we're going to be able to find our x-intercepts. So don't let that slow you down. All right, so now we need our 2 solutions, or our 2 intercepts. I like to draw a little split. How you like to organize it is going to be up to you. I'm going to do the plus part first. So 8 plus 5.66 divided by 2. And then I have the minus. 8 minus 5.66 divided by 2. Please be very careful. Look at the 2 that I have set up. The only thing that changes sign is the 5.66. The 8 is positive. The 2 is positive. The only thing that changes sign is the thing that follows the plus minus, which is the 5.66. So now what you have to do first you need to make sure you add first 8 plus 5.66, then divide by 2, and we get 6.83. You have to do the addition first. You have to hit enter on the calculator, then take your answer and divide by 2. If you try to put everything in the calculator all at once, you need to put parentheses around those numerators if you want to put it all in at once. Then for the subtraction, 8 minus 5.66, get that answer, then divide by 2, and we have 1.17. So those are our two X-intercepts. If you want to write them as ordered pairs, you can. I know some of us are probably running out of space there, but those are our X-intercepts. Now, since we have our quadratic formula, I want to give you a little bit, I would say, better way to find your axis of symmetry. I know for some of us, sometimes we struggle to get the right X-intercepts, so then it makes finding the axis of symmetry really tough. So now that we have our quadratic formula, I want to give you a little bit different way to find your axis of symmetry. Once we know that idea of A, B, and C, and we have them picked out, your axis of symmetry, you're going to want to jot this little formula down. It's just the opposite of B divided by 2A. So even if you struggle to find your X-intercepts, this is also a really nice way to check to make sure you've got the right middle of your graph. You can use this little formula. I know some of us struggled with our factoring to get our X-intercepts and things. This little formula isn't going to fail you to find your axis of symmetry. Before, we were relying on finding our X-intercepts to get our axis of symmetry. Now we have this slick little formula. You're like, Miss Golly, how am I supposed to remember that? Well, check this out. Let me erase this little bit here. It is part of the quadratic formula. It's just the piece, it's not the plus minus piece. So it is there for you. You're going to have the formula on your test when you take it. It's just that little piece there. And if you do enough of the practice, it becomes like second nature. So this one won't fail you. You don't have to have X-intercepts to get your axis of symmetry, which is really, really nice. You don't have to. And then once we start dealing with decimals and things, this is going to be a great way that will work every time for you. So what that would look like for us in this case, we'd have the opposite of B, or if you want to show yourself the negative, you can. And then 2 times our A. So you're really not having to find, you already know your A, B, and C. It's part of your quadratic formula. You just don't have to do the square root part. So it's there for you. So it's nothing that you're necessarily going to have to memorize either. Negative 8 becomes positive. 2 times 1 is 2. Our axis of symmetry is x equals 4. Finding the other pieces doesn't change. For some of us, based on our quiz, we need a little refresher on finding the vertex. Almost everybody on their quiz, guys, I was impressed. We knew that the axis of symmetry value was the x of our vertex. That was awesome overall. But then I had a lot of people that for the y value just stuck in the y-intercept. The y-intercept is when x is 0. I need to know the y when x is 4 in this case. So we need to take our equation, y equals, and we need to put 4 in for every x that we see. So again, this is a great opportunity for us to learn from our quiz. Okay, on my quiz, yeah, Miss Golly, I just put the y-intercept as the other part of the vertex, and I got confused when I graphed. Here's an opportunity, guys, for us to get that extra practice. We need to know how to find the other part of our vertex. That process doesn't change for us. And then again, enter that into your calculator exactly as you see it. I'm not testing you on, do you know order of operations? I'm checking to see if you can find the other part of your vertex. Do you understand to put that 4 in for x to get your y. Put the computation part in your calculator, totally fine. Now the y-intercept, guys, we wrapped that on our quiz. If you need to show yourself the work, you can. If you need to show yourself putting 0 in for the x's, go for it. But remember, when it comes down to it, that y-intercept is literally just your last value. That y-intercept is just your last value. That constant. It's our c. Now that we've really labeled the a's, b's, and c's, it's just our c. We've got all the pieces we need. Let's create our graph. So you can start wherever you want. I'm just going to work my way through. I'm going to graph my intercepts. 6.83, well, we go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we put a point that's kind of closer to 7 than it is to 6. We're going to have some not ideal decimals sometimes for our x-intercepts. This is just a sketch. Get as close as you can. Then we're going to have 1.17, so we go to 1, and we go a little bit past it. We should try to be closer to the line for 1 than we are for the line for 2. So those are our x-intercepts. They go on the x-axis. Let's see. Our axis of symmetry is at x equals 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I know not everybody chooses to graph that. I like graphing that because I know that's supposed to be the middle of my graph. If it's not at the middle, either I made a mistake on the axis of symmetry or I made a mistake on my x-intercepts. You know your graph should be symmetric, so go back and find your mistake if it's not looking that way. Vertex is 4, -8, right there. Y-intercept is at +8, so way up there. The y-intercept is 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces from the middle. So I have its mirror image, 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces on the other side. And we connect as best as we can. It should be that nice curvy U shape. Remember, they're not V's. It's not absolute value. Just be careful. Domain and range. Domain and range, we're looking really, really good on our quiz also. Domain is all reals. And guys, that R, that's the domain. That's done. Some of us were trying to do that R, and then we're trying to do the less than or equal to for the range. We need to separate. And you can look on your own quiz to see if you did the domain and range correctly or if that's something you need to focus on. So domain is all real numbers. The range then relates to y. Our graph opens up, so we're greater than or equal to. And guys, be very careful. This is the y value from the vertex. It's not the y-intercept. It's the y value from the vertex. We've been using that ever since we started graphing these last unit. So a couple changes for us today. The graph's going to look the same. Where we put the x-intercept, the vertex, y-intercept, the look of the graph doesn't change. The little things that are going to be different for us, we're going to use quadratic formula to find the x-intercepts. And then for the axis of symmetry, guys, start using that little slick formula. And you can use that anytime. Whether I ask you to factor or do the quadratic formula, you can use that anytime.